If you have Visio 2010 Premium, you can create your Microsoft SharePoint workflows here in Visio and then import them into SharePoint Designer. Now, there are a number of different workflow templates in Visio, but the only one that you can use for this is the Microsoft SharePoint workflow. Also, there's no way to update something to SharePoint workflow. So if someone has created a basic workflow, you can't automatically turn it into a Microsoft SharePoint workflow. You have to start intentionally right here. I'm going to double click, and I have several different sets of shapes that have been put together. One of actions, one of conditions, and one of terminators. If you're used to using Visio, you might want to add some more shapes. Say I'd like to look for some engineering shapes and add them or draw with other items, but you can't do that and import them into SharePoint. These are the three groups of shapes that you can use. A couple of other caveats. Every single possible action and condition is here, even if it's not supported in the library you would put it in, even if it can only be used in SharePoint Enterprise Server and you have SharePoint Foundation. So when you're taking a look at the actions, you need to be responsible to know which ones of these will work in your context. It is possible in Visio, actually pretty easy, to create a new set of shapes, for example, my SharePoint workflow shapes or my SharePoint workflow actions, and drag some of these into that stencil so that you have a subset that you would use rather than using the entire set of shapes. If you'd like to learn more about customizing the Visio 2010 environment to create SharePoint workflows, take a look at the Visio 2010 Essentials course in the lynda.com online training library. But let's go ahead and create our own workflow. Every workflow in SharePoint has to start with a start and end with a terminate. So I'm going to go ahead and drag a start out here, and then we're going to add some actions. The first thing that we're going to do, this is a workflow that's going to run when something is saved into our expense report library. There are two types of things that get saved there. One is that folks will save the expense reports themselves. The other is that folks will save supporting documentation. For example, they might save a PDF of an airline ticket or something similar. There's a different naming convention for those items. So the first thing we want to do is every single thing that's submitted, we actually want to send an email. You'll notice that the print here is really small. Let me drop the other shapes on, and then I'm going to pump up the volume so that these are easier for us to see. After we've sent that first email that says, this item has been submitted, thank you very much, what we want to do is we want to decide what kind of item it is. And we want to decide that based on its file type. So I'm going to take a look and see what file types we have here. And then, based on the file type, we're going to take another action. And the action is going to be that we're going to send an email. So we're either going to send an email that says, hey, a new expense report has been received. That's our first email. If it's just an image, however, or a document that's supporting a workflow, we're actually not going to send an email about that. So we would then simply stop the workflow. This, however, isn't a real stop. We still have to terminate the workflow out here on the end. So let me now select all the shapes, do a Control-A, and I'm going to change our font size here to a 14 point so that we can see this a little bit more easily. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in and edit the contents. So we're going to send an email, that's the name of the action, so let's keep that, to the submitter. File received. Then file is of specific type. Well, the specific type of form used in this library where we're dropping these expense reports is an Excel file. So we're going to say file is an XLSX file. Excel. If the answer here is no, we're going to stop the workflow, but if not, we're going to send an email to accounts payable, new expense report submitted. So there we go. And again, if you're having any trouble seeing this, feel free to pump the volume up enough that you can actually see the text. But we also want to be able to see the icons. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm pretty comfortable with where we are right now. And I'm just going to zoom in so this fills the screen. Notice that we have different icons for the different actions. Here we're sending an email. Here we're stopping a workflow. And here we're checking a file type. So every single one of these actions and conditions have their very own iconography that goes with them. The last thing that I'm going to need to do is to connect my steps. So remember that you have this red box that shows you're gluing. I'm going to glue from here to here. I have a connection point here. The red box signals that I'm connected here to here. Two possibilities, one here, one there, and then here. There's actually technically a step that is here if you stop the workflow that it goes down to terminate. It doesn't hurt for me to draw that in. I want to add a couple of other pieces of information. So if the file is an XLS file, this is a yes, this is a no, and I'm going to go to Process now and I'm going to check my diagram. It says that there were no issues found, that it's valid the way I've drawn it. That's a good thing to know. If I want to use this diagram, I need to save it because my next step is to export it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save this drawing as opposed to the workflow file, the drawing of the workflow in Visio. And we're going to give this a good name. So this is email, check file type, and notify AP, for example. Or I could say that I'm going to email the submitter, check file type, notify AP. This is going to end up being a name that I'm going to see later, so I want to choose carefully and not just call it drawing 5, as I did up here where I had these brilliant file names. So I'm all set. I'm going to click Save. And now my workflow has been saved as a Microsoft Visio SharePoint diagram right here.